Hiya, I'm Bruce Fummey. Every year at thousands of Burns suppers in countries all over the world, people tell the story of Robert Burns. There must be a lot to say. But I've come to his birthplace to condense his life into 10 minutes. So if you fancy a summary rather than an in-depth investigation, then this is the video for you. For people, places and events in Scottish history, hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell to find out when I publish new videos. In the meantime, let me tell you a story. I've now come down to Burns' monument to try and get away from the worst of the traffic. These are National Trust sites, and if you enjoy historical places of interest, you should definitely join. I'll leave a link in the description below. Burns was born about 50 years after Scotland and England were merged into the United Kingdom, and just 13 years after Bonnie Prince Charlie took a boat over the sea to Skye with Flora MacDonald. It was the age of enlightenment, agricultural development and transatlantic slavery. He was born with the Industrial Revolution, so the American Revolution in his 20s and the French Revolution as he hit 30. He packed a lot into a short life, at a time when the world was changing at breakneck speed. It was still difficult breaking out of the lower orders, but the Burns family tried. His dad was a hard-working, motivated self-starter who built that cottage himself. He then chipped in with other parents to bring a tutor to the area to educate their kids. Now, young Robert wasn't necessarily the best student, but he stood out as an avid reader and eloquent conversationalist. As the family grew, Dad moved up, and from a gardener he took on a farm at a place called Mount Oliphant when Rob was 7. Now, sometimes when you move into a new area of business, folk take advantage. He was stuck with a lease and poor ground, and Rob, as the oldest boy, took a lot of the work on. Then there was puberty, l'amour, and a young lass called Nellie Kilpatrick triggered his poetic instinct. They struggled at Mount Oliphant, but Dad managed to scrape together enough to send Rob to Kirkoswald School for one summer in his only formal education. Then they managed to rent out a slightly better farm called Loch Lee near Tarbolton. Dad needed to borrow capital from the landlord to stock the farm, but things were improving a bit. And Burns continued to improve himself with reading and in other ways too. At 21, some of the young men at Tarbolton formed a bachelor's club for up to 16 of them to meet, discuss and debate. Now a young man, he had to think about making his own way. They'd been growing flax for the linen trade, so Rab decided to go to Irvine to learn flax dressing. Now, Irvine was a town with characters, seafarers and all sorts. Burns was in his element, with a mind broadening by the day. He learned flax dressing, but also fell seriously ill. And then his boss's wife got pissed and burnt the shop down. So back at the farm, and things were even tougher. Pesky American colonialists had started a rebellion which made trade difficult. And then his dad died, and they left Loch Lee farm and a bastard Wayne behind. That would become a pattern. This time, they were able to stock Mosgiel farm without borrowing. Now, his time at Mosgiel was some of his most fruitful. He was the head of a household. He wrote what are now some of his most famous poems, describing the beauty of nature, rural life, and satirising the pompous. His health was still poor, but he was healthy enough to make a few trips to the penitent stool in the church, designed for fornicators, you know. Aye, he fell in love again with Jean Armour, and aye, she got pregnant. Even then, her dad wouldn't let her marry Burns. How bad is your reputation when you get a lassie pregnant in the 18th century and her dad says you can't marry her? Better fall in love with somebody else then, eh? Highland Mary was from Argyll. Now, after a wee bit, she decided to go and live with relatives for a few months. Oh aye. Here's the old kirk near Burns' cottage. The first grave as you enter is Robert's dad, William Burness. His aunt used to tell Rob ghost stories about this place, but Rob's life was turning into a bit of a horror story. He decided to go to work in Jamaica on a slave plantation. Now, Jamaica had a terrible reputation for killing even privileged, healthy whites. Burns was in poor health. What's more, his first year's wages would barely cover the cost of his passage. Go to a deadly tropical island, travel hundreds of miles on a dirt track to get to a plantation where you'll spend a year paying back your fare? That didn't make sense. And don't get me wrong, some folks from Ayrshire had made it good and come back to buy large tracts of farmland with their profits. But the secret was to go out with some social status, manage a plantation, meet a widow who owned a plantation. The death rate meant that there were normally a ready supply of widows, deal with the moral repugnancy of slavery, work for a few years to get the plantation shipshape, then put in an overseer to manage the business and come back to Scotland to count the cash. The problem was, he was going to take Mary Campbell. How was that going to work? This level of desperation suggests that Burns was rushing in a panic towards a Jamaican graveyard even faster than his most famous character, Tam O'Shanter, fled this one. And what about the illegitimate children he was leaving? The only thing he has of value are his poems. He raised subscription funding and commissioned a Kilmarnock printer to produce a book of his poems, which would be his legacy. Now, I've got some good news and some bad news. The book of poems did really well. Folks were delighted with the high-flown thought, the homely charm and satirical bite. But Mary, possibly along with another child, was lost to typhoid. But flushed with artistic success, Rab headed off to Edinburgh. When he got there, he was feted, he was celebrated, he was acclaimed as Scotland's national bard. He decided to stay for a bit. Oh, he fell in love again, several times. And yes, there were pregnancies. As the new town was being built, he was welcomed in sophisticated drawing rooms by folks that would never look twice at a peasant farmer. He was now a national figure. He was a celebrity. Everyone wanted to meet the ploughman poet. He sold the copyright for his book and a second publication was planned. And he didn't have to go to Jamaica. In Edinburgh, he planned on a new future here in Scotland. Through new connections and with a capital from his copyright, he took on Ellisland Farm in Dumfries and got a government job as an exciseman. And then he went on tour through the borders and up into the Highlands, collecting songs along the way and drawing on his experiences to write his own. Now he was allowed to marry Jean Armour, and they settled down to the life of farming, tax collecting and more baby making. He wrote for newspapers, tried his hand as a playwright, wrote 4 volumes of Scottish songs and helped set up a library. He played the fiddle as well, you know. He was also a bit of a radical. He sent cannon to help support the French Revolution, although he also joined a Dad's Army regiment to fight Napoleon on the home front and waded out to a boat at sea, sword in hand, to take on a pirate ship. He didn't just write poems. But it was in Dumfries that he did write a poem about a drunken Ayrshire farmer who on his way home one night stopped off at that churchyard. On that night there were witches and warlocks dancing and cavorting with Satan himself. When they discovered their voyeur Tam O'Shanter, they chased him from the Kirkyard all the way here to this bridge. Now, thankfully, witches can't cross running water. So when Tam reached this point, he escaped death. But Burns couldn't escape death. Indeed, it came far too early. On the 21st of July 1796, at the age of 36, Robert Burns died in Dumfries. There's a monument to him there. There's one here and many across the world. The greater memorial is that people 250 years later still read and recite his poetry. There's so much more to tell, but in the 10 minutes that we've had, I hope I've whetted your appetite. If you'd like, I've got an hour-long comedy show about the poem Tam O'Shanter. You can buy it, you know, right? It's only a £5, but there is smut. I'll leave a link in the description below. Incidentally, as Burns was living out his life, Flora MacDonald was also living out hers. If you want to know what happened to her after Bonnie Prince Charlie, then click the link here. In the meantime, ha mi an dochas gwn bí lama alive. Cheerio and Drasla.